KrakCast News is back, and so are we. Guys, heading into the middle of December, things changed this week for the worse. We got some really weird snow. It wasn't really snow. It was like whiteout kind. Did you see that the other day? What the hell? Looked out the window. I couldn't see.
Flights were canceled. A friend of ours who was supposed to fly to Krakow was diverted to Katowice.
Visibility was like zero, like really, really zero.
When you're in a glass office building high up, such a panorama presents a spectacular workspace.
Pretty nice, huh? Mm-hmm. Oh well. Let's dive into the news here. Let's just talk about this week. Just a quick mention of Cyberpunk. Can I sneak this in there really quick?
Oh, the video game. Yeah. Big news.
Yeah, big news. It official release was 2 days ago as we record this, and the internet is flooded right now with complaints of various technical issues. Bit of a rough launch.
To mention, did I read this right? That there's unexpected penises falling out of pants and stuff like unexpected dick shots. I mean,
I haven't seen that. Wouldn't be surprised.
That's like the biggest laughed at glitch right now. Is that something with the rendering that your junk basically pops up, because it's also something that's customizable in this game. So
Your level of realism.
This is customized. What kind of game is this? I'm not a gamer. Fill me in.
Well, basically, what's going on right now with this glitch? It's hilarious. It's basically.
You really do select your sword before playing.
No, you select basically all your physical characteristics and all that kind of
including. Hold on a second, right? The game starts with you choosing the length of your own penis.
I don't know the exact details.
I don't think it's exactly like that, but the effect is that way.
Enter the girth zone.
So we talked about it before.
Maybe is that a glitch, or are you just happy to see me?
CD Projekt Red, Polish development company. I think, are they still the most valuable company on the Warsaw Stock Exchange? I think
it still is, but they've lost about 20% of their value.
So they released the title on Thursday, and usually gamers can be forgiving with release issues, technical issues, but 7 years in the making. The game was already delayed twice. It was supposed to be out in March of this year, April this year, I forgot. So this is exactly the kind of thing that was supposed to be cleaned up. You're not supposed to have.
You think they'd put some pants on?
You're not supposed to have penis glitches. Yeah. When you've been given this much time and this many resources to get things organized.
Is this the game I've been hearing you might be reviewing with Alan, our video game?
I hope so. I don't know if he got it at launch yet or not. If we do, probably in January, but at some point we'll get around to it. But most of the issues have to do with the game being played on previous generation hardware. I mean, in fairness to CD Projekt Red, they were trying to optimize for two different generations, and it's really hard to do. I mean, to get it right for two completely different pieces, two different pieces of hardware, and we're seeing the results of that now.
This stuff genuinely interests me, but I'm not a gamer. So can you put a bit of context for people like me about how big a launch this is? Like, where this means a lot, right? I mean, this is a huge series, a huge title.
Well, it's the first title in a new IP. CD Projekt Red is known for the Witcher, and so they announced that they're going to go in a completely different direction. They could have made Witcher 4 and made $1 trillion, but to their credit, they decided to go in a different direction. And again, a lot of time and essentially unlimited resources to make the perfect game. And this is embarrassing for them, and it should be, really. In all fairness, this is exactly the kind of thing that's supposed to be sorted out in Q&A testing, and not Q&A, just QA testing. And then they have the people, they have the developers to fix these kind of things. They came out with like a 43 gigabyte day one patch or something like that. I mean, what a mess. But again, it's mostly due to the fact that we're trying to make people using two very different machines happy, trying to make the same game work on two different machines, and it's just hard. So good luck to them. That's
always the case, right?
Good luck. Well, no, because usually like a AAA title like this is released further into the life cycle of one established console. But you can't release a huge game right now and ignore Xbox One and PlayStation 4 people. There's such a massive installed base. You have to make the game work for their machine too. You can't say this only works for PlayStation 5 or this only works for Xbox Series X, because the people with previous generation consoles won't be able to buy it. So it's a bad business. It's a bad business decision.
So it's a new gen game that's being at the moment predominantly played on the last gen thing, and that's what's causing some of the backward compatibility.
Because it has very high technical demands, and
never would have figured
the previous generation can only handle so much. So they have to nerf it. They have to dumb it down. They have to lower the resolution, lower everything that puts a demand on the processor. Yeah.
Dumb it down is a good expression. That's how you should do it when you're talking to me about games. That was very interesting.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, let's talk about this, Dave. I'm especially curious to get your take, because this is basically your neighborhood. a lot of stories online this week about how the city unveiled some plans to inject some life into the area around Hala Targowa, specifically on ulica Grzegorzetska, on the other side, going away from the center of town, on the other side of the rail bridge that's been under construction forever, basically.
Yeah, Hala Targowa.
We saw some artistic renderings of what it could look like. Very interesting. Lots of trees, lots of green. Let's start with, do you agree? I think we do, but I'll ask anyway. Do we agree that that area is in need of a facelift?
Yes. Its predominant characteristic at the moment is bird shit. Literally, we're talking about an area of Krakow that is famous for one thing. An old blue van that sells sausages in front of an old vegetable market, both of which we're hoping to keep, but everything else should be definitely redesigned. And the idea is a pretty cool one. Dashinskiego, which runs down to Galeria Kazimierz, is a lovely kind of planty-like parkway,
very leafy,
walkway.
Greeny place.
Very nice.
It's got that thing. It's similar to Dietler, isn't it? It's a big, it's two carriageways with a very, very broad central reservation.
Playgrounds, and also very, very kid-friendly.
Yeah. And that's the idea, to link it all up.
And it's, in fact, I mean, if I'm correct, Dietler and Dashinskiego essentially follow the route of what was the old river before it kind of like dried up.
Exactly.
To the extent that they filled
So
it.
yeah, I agree, Dave. The whole area around there is a the whole area around Hala Targowa is a dump. Let's be honest, it sucks.
It's full of a lot of kind of shady, homelessly kind of characters.
No, I should graffiti over there. And the Hala Targowa itself, I mean, I know it's got its like throwback nostalgic appeal. You feel like you're stepping into a 1970s flea market, but it's a dump.
And it's acts as a car park. It's a really ugly little piece of land usage.
Well, in its defense, for instance, the market is.
You're going to defend that.
The market is quite popular, especially on Sundays. They have like
the market's still going to be there. Now it's going to be cool.
Well, the Hala Targowa building inside, it's like a normal convenience store now. They updated, so I don't know when you haven't been there.
It's very pricey. It's crap. I hate it.
I mean, I don't go there much. It's boring, but it's there.
Yeah, but Krakow, as we've covered in our one of our pieces this week, has many convenience stores. And what's really cool about this, just to go back to it, is they're simply trying to link this bird shit stained kind of wasteland with these two lovely kind of green patch developments to replicate the old river. And the design features a garden on top of the market. The market will still be there with a roof garden. Some tables, chairs,
it's never going to happen.
Playgrounds. What do you mean it's never going to happen?
Every building now has, when they get the artist rendering, they always put a garden on top. It looks great,
that is true.
But in fact, it never works.
Well,
it
look,
never happens.
I'm not wedded to the roof having grass on it. Let's be honest about it. You can't see it from ground level anyway. But the rest of the landscaping will make it only one lane of traffic. So it's basically going to have bike lanes, pedestrian lanes, and there's a big change coming to the tram stops there. Now, again, I know you hear this a lot if you listen to the show, but I had a little difficulty gleaming from the article I was reading exactly what the change is going to be, but it means that there's going to be a lot more footfall getting on and off trams down there, right?
Because there's going to be a railway station there. And I think the the understanding is that up until now the majority of commuter traffic coming into the city centre has been getting off at the main railway station, and it's now being put forward that the station that they put right next to the bridge and at Hala Targowa will be the main commuter rail station for people who are working in the centre of Krakow, because it's a very, very good tram interchange there. You're not far from Starowiczna either, so And
it makes sense because the way the negotiations seem to be going to City Council and the petitions and the surveys they're doing for the 20,000 extra metres of space under the bridge now, the new bridge. First of all, the city promised to replace the greenery that mound had grown on it. It was a grassed hill, basically. So they kind of owe the city some green spaces there.
Embankment is the word you're looking for.
And now, if you think about it, it'd be logical for if you joined this all up, you could then kind of turn left and have an adjoining kind of series of quirky little park spaces and with maybe some bars and restaurants.
I think that's exactly the plan. I mean, even there was one kind of like artist's
all the way down to the river eventually.
Rendition I saw that kind of was illustrating the station, and at one end of the platform you've got exits for town centre. The other end of the platform, you've got exits going this way for Kazimierz, the exits going this way for Galeria Kazimierz. And I think the idea is it's almost like kind of shifting some of the focus away from the main station, which is in the centre of the town, but it's like, it's maybe not in the centre of the town in terms of where people actually really want to go. Whereas, this point is it's like midway between the old city centre and Kazimierz, and also very close to kind of Grzegorzecki and that whole kind of business area as well.
It's funny how we don't have a lot of urban rail stations, satellite stations that are actually close to the center of town, where there are a lot of suburban stations, but they're way out in some cases. And I think in Wobrzów, Wobrzowska over there in the north part of town, there's one. That's the closest one I can think of, but nothing else really close to the center. So it makes sense. It also makes sense, I think, the whole renovation project, Dave, makes sense because they're already at huge cost and trouble and headache. They've renovated that whole rail line there. Mm-hmm. What's that street called? It has a weird Blick, I think it's called.
Yeah.
They've opened up what used to be the embankment. I mean, it's a general upgrade of the whole thing, and so it makes sense to extend everything to Hala Targowa right next to it, just to improve the whole area and to integrate everything. I just don't know to what extent Hala Targowa will continue to survive as a market.
What is it now? The vegetable market will still be the central kind of feature of the place. I mean, they're not getting rid of that. I mean, that's, going to still be there.
The market owners there, the merchants, have complained that the plans that are being presented right now get rid of a lot of the parking spaces around there. They need that for their trucks and their supplies, plus a lot of clients.
I'm sorry, the cars are total eyesore. I mean, they're absolutely... But the worst part of Hala Targowa is that the front of it, in front of the blue van, is a car park.
And in the back as well. But you have to understand, if you're a merchant or if you're selling whatever you're selling there, you need to drive up there and drop off your goods, and you're not necessarily
drop it off. Yeah, you don't need.
But these are small people. These are farmers that put what they have in the back of their car, drive over into town, and try to sell it. They don't have other people that drive back and forth between places, and they're saying that if they can't park anywhere, plus for the antiques market that's on weekends, if there's no parking for customers, that they're both saying that both these merchants and the grocery merchants are saying that that's going to basically kill their business.
It's all full traffic there. People are picking up cabbages, for God's sake. They're not buying fucking tables,
Before we move on, can I just renew my
huge catchment area?
Renew my complete bafflement and confusion at the popularity of the blue sausage van. I will never,
you never let this one go.
I won't let it go, and I don't understand it. Not only is it nothing special, but have you noticed also? Last time I passed by there, I noticed there was no cash register. Are we not? Do we have to pay taxes anymore for this?
The tax man.
I get receipts.
Such a dick.
Really? No. There's nothing. That is. It's just like the.
He sells
just
sausages.
Like the Zapiekanka on Platz Nova. Everything tastes great at 2 a.m. when you're drunk. In the light of day, nobody would think there was anything special about the sausage.
Decent. They are good sausages. They are good sausages. I can't be bothered waiting on them because there's always a queue. But it's decent value as well for what you get.
All right. I just don't get it. Anyway, moving on. Let's go to a different.
I have to say, one thing I've never gotten is standing. It has to be the most bird shitted 100 meter square of concrete in this entire city. I don't know what it is that attracts these legions of
sausage that people throw on the ground. They say this sucks. Why did I pay 12 zlotys for this?
I was being sarcastic. Fucking hell. Anyway,
when I say moving on, that's your cue to go back to what we covered like 2 minutes ago, right? When I say
that's like kind of like as night follows day. You say moving on.
Let's move on. One more thing. Moving on.
I can't help having interesting thoughts.
Just something.
But you notice he's picked up this tactic of going,
now it's your turn.
Somebody interrupts with something and he goes, "Oh, that's a very neat segue into what I'm now going to say," which doesn't necessarily have any
I'm just going to let 30
whatsoever.
Seconds of dead air pass before I move on to anything.
Well, it's not dead air, is it? Though I mean, there's always someone.
Shut up, Paul. A lot of beeping.
Is it 30 seconds yet? Can I move on?
Close enough, yeah.
Okay, close enough. Let's move on to something we've talked about before. We also, as I recall, we had different opinions about this, guys. The space on Karmelicka Street, if you're headed away from the center of town, about 200 meters on your left, just after you pass Rajska Street on your left. Right now it's a parking lot, a huge parking lot. You see a lot of buses in there, I think. The city bought the land and they want to change it into a park, and they're taking ideas for exactly what the park should look like. They throw it open to the public for suggestions. We're in the process of that now. Guys, I think the last time we talked about this, I told you I was against it because there are literally two huge parks at either end of the same street. But anyway, how do you see this? How do you see this project going, and what would you like to see in this space?
I would like a mixture, a recognition of where it's located. You know, it's not exactly perfect for a super family park. I think it's perfect for a more hipster-like park. You know,
Hipster park?
A hipster park where, like, you know, Brooklyn.
What does that look like?
Like the one down beside the main road, except in a better location. You know, that's a nice place. Me and Mike had a beer down there. You know, it's beside, what do you call that place? The new hip trendy spot.
Right across the other side of the river, yeah.
Everyone's blanking on me. Come on.
All right, but let's go back to
Nobody's
the
even looking at me.
Karmelicka Park.
Yeah, Karmelicka Park.
It was voted on by the city budget vote from last year that it should be fashioned into a park, and the name that's being floated right now is Szymborska, like the Polish Nobel laureate poet. But a lot of the activists that wanted to push for this park are now complaining that the city's basic proposed right now is pretty much freshening up just the concrete and sticking some trees here and there. The main issue being, of course, funds, that the funds aren't available to turn into a true lush green park.
Yeah, because of Corona.
Because trees are really expensive.
It's a delay, in funding, and they're gathering ideas to kind of, you know.
Plus, they also say that whatever proposition is put out there has to also incorporate the possibility of a future metro underground subway stop.
Well, I think that's why they need to look at giving a mandate to commercial businesses and saying, look, guys, you can set up a bar here under these circumstances. I think that would be really attractive to a lot of business owners once we get back to normal.
Well, I think, often the question is when you have kind of commercial concessions on so-called public spaces is how much exactly the concession costs, because there's usually some kind of jockeying around the fact that on the one hand, if you have a concession in a popular public space, you've got the opportunity to make loads of money. On the other hand, because of that, the city is going to charge you an enormous amount to be there in the first place, which means that that's going to push up your prices.
And it's a two-way street. If you're going to open a business there, you expect the landscaping to be done by the city. But if the issue the city's having at the moment is they normally be getting loans at very low rates for this, but they haven't any cash in the bank, so they've nothing to put up as collateral. So the funding has gone down to a minimum level, right? So what we have here is a kind of crisis. What they need is emergency funding, or they'll need to be creative. And if they're going to have to be creative, they're going to have to say to a few businesses, well, if you sign on to take a lease on these terms, then we can take that to a bank who can then issue a loan to pay for the landscaping up front.
Josh, when you mentioned trees, you reminded me of something I want to ask about. And going back to our previous story about the proposed renovation of the Hala Targowa area, in the artist renderings for that, there are lots of green, lots of trees everywhere. And it seemed to me that I was thinking that the city seems very, schizophrenic when it comes to trees. In one place, it's let's cut them all down, and somewhere else, it's let's plant new ones.
Yeah, we have these.
They don't seem to have a consistent policy about trees.
I was joking, right, about tree surgeons being evil and all that on an episode recently, but I was joking. There are experts in tree management that make these decisions based off their expert knowledge that they gained over many, many years.
Yeah, I know, but there is this thing with.
Is the deep stake after your trees, John?
Oh, no.
We had this thing, like loads of episodes back. I think we discussed something to do about trees along by the Wisła and willow trees in particular. They grow very quickly, but they also can very quickly, in tree terms, like over the course of 50 years or so, reach a state of they're actually dangerous and they need to be cut down. And interestingly, more or less, well, I think actually, yes, finished all the roadworks around here at Dikla and Krakowska. And I've been walking around there a lot. And there are trees planted on Krakowska. And there's never been trees on Krakowska, in all the time that I've lived in Krakow. So these are new extra trees.
Well, that reminds me of another episode we did where we talked. This is a long time ago, when Sławkowska, in the very center of town, was being renovated. Part of the original plan was to plant trees there as well, and somebody, maybe the conservator, overruled it. And they said it wasn't consistent with the street's historical character. But there are plenty of photographs from the center of town, even the Rennick. There were trees until maybe 40, 50 years ago. And so, they're not consistent, I guess is my point. One place we're cutting them down, one place we're promoting trees.
Why would the communist government 60 years ago's tree policy?
No. I mean, even today, we're cutting down trees. Like where I live, close to where I live, there were some beautiful trees right next. They were next to a rail line. Maybe that had something to do with it. All cut down.
Hard decisions do have to be made in terms of commercial and especially transport. In Dublin, there was a new plan to widen the bus corridors going into town from several leafy suburbs, involved making them less leafy. But if you want a controversial political topic, try chopping down 200 middle class people's trees. There's going to be absolute more.
By the way, the trees in the Rinnick predated the communist government here. I'm just want to point that out.
Every tree that's cut down, right? You have to see this from the council tree surgeon point of view, right? They don't want to listen to that. Okay, so their actual incentive surely is to keep as many trees standing as possible. I'm sure. I just have faith that they would only cut a tree down if it was absolutely necessary.
Well, going back to the Hala Targowa thing, I'll bet that there won't be nearly as many trees as there are in the artist impressions we're seeing now. Well, John, I don't know. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think it's going to be.
John, me and you are going to visit that park when it opens, and I'm going going to watch you do your favorite thing, take your socks off, and just run through the grass barefoot like a child.
Oh yeah, who walks around barefoot around Hala Targowa, for God's sake? All the bird shit over there.
That place was famous for selling heroin back in the day.
I'm talking about Karmelicka. We moved on to Karmelicka.
Okay, Karmelicka Park. Okay, we'll go there. All right, moving on. Another transformation in a different part of the city, not far from where we are now. We learned this week that the parking lot that currently exists on Plac Volnica, one of the big squares in Kazimierz, will be completely liquidated and will be turned into a leisure area. As far as I know, it's one of the very last such parking areas in the entire city. What do you think about the war on parking?
I mean, I always thought the only people that go to Plac Volnica go to park there, but it's actually really come on a lot in the last few years. It used to be the forgotten Platz in Krakow, really, but since what's the name of the street that joins it up down to the river?
Mostowa.
Yeah, excellent street, really developed well, and it's become a little hidden gem, and it's time to finish the hidden gemmery by doing the painful last step of clearing the parking away. Look, I always have very little sympathy for this, because when I started running bars in the centre of the city, Szczepanski and, believe it or not, the Mauer Rennick was a car park.
Yeah.
And that was all taken away in the early years, and we had to, what's heavy, Mike? Barrels of beer. They are very heavy. It is not convenient to transport them. You know what are very light? Vegetables. Okay? You can carry a lot of vegetables in two hands.
Plac Szczepanski parking gone, Bobby Rennick parking gone. I don't know if it had a name, but the one on Spitalna, right by the theater, also gone, turned into a kind of a park now. Now Plac Volnica parking. I mean, you may or may not like cars, but they do need a place to park, and so.
Well, look, I mean, let's be fair.
Bring them into the city centre. Get the tram in.
Plac Volnica was never a full-time car park. It was always kind of, being cleared whenever there was an event. When I say always, of course, I mean in the last 10 years or so. But it was specifically a concession that was created whilst the roadworks, the redevelopment of Krakowska was taking place, is that for businesses and residents in the area around Krakowska Street, Plac Volnica will be available for them as a car park. And now that the works are finished, it's no longer necessary, so it can no longer be a car park.
And let's not forget what those works were for: to further extend Krakow's world-class public transport network. Now, this is my thing. I don't like to get up. I never like to lecture people. I like to complain, sure, but not lecture people. But my one observation about Krakowians is they really need to embrace thinking about, where possible, not using their car, because there's no bloody need. I've lived in the city for a long time. It's very well connected, and I come from a city that's not, and it's painful when your city is basically a series of housing islands that must be always traversed by car, and that is not the case in the city. Some people need to use cars, especially families, but if you can avoid it, there's lots of ways of avoiding it. And Dave's stopping his preaching here.
Krakowska is now a fabulous street, actually. There is vastly less traffic. The pavements are much more broad. They're very, very nice pavements with very nice kind of slightly kind of tan coloured flagstones. There are these trees everywhere. There are benches. There are multiple places you lock your bicycle up. I think it's going to be good for all the businesses down there. It's very good for cyclists. I'm sure it's very good for trams. They don't make as much noise. Fantastic.
You mentioned the businesses. The last time I was on Platzvolnica, not too long ago, actually, I noticed that some of the restaurants seem to be doing reasonably well. Have kind of
Some very good restaurants down there.
Yeah, but there were. I think the COVID situation
that's COVID, though, isn't
has
it?
completely destroyed them. So the business will come back. But right now it looks...
There's that Michelin star-rated restaurant right on the corner from there as well. I wonder how they're doing.
Good question, actually. Our friends at... how do you say it again?
Bottiglieri something.
Yeah, he was a guest on our show.
Bottiglieri, a 4-digit number.
Bottiglieri 1881.
We should check into them.
Yeah,
yes.
Kajetan. Great guy.
Yeah. Where are we going now? Dr. Mike, let's talk about Olren, Poland's energy giant, and their weird connection that nobody really understands to the world of media and press. What the hell's going on here?
Basically, Olren now, which is partially state-owned, I think about 25-26% of the stock are owned by the state, has bought the media group Polska Prasa, which is previously owned by a German media conglomerate. The exact sum has not been declared, but it's probably a lot.
Why is a gasoline energy fuel company buying media platforms?
Oh, they're saying that this goes into their portfolio for retailers as well, and also remember that they sell a lot of newspapers and content at their stations. But
let me throw an alternate theory at you.
And they bought Ruch as well, of course.
And you tell me if there's anything to this. Here's my theory. Some guy named Kaczynski picked up the phone to his friend at Olren and said, look, we want to repollinize national media, and why don't you do it for us?
Yeah, Daniel Boytek, because we're too afraid to write a law trying to repollinize it because we actually don't want to piss the EU off that much.
That's a likely theory. I can definitely appreciate the concept.
So surely Olren must have paid way over the market price, given the seller knew what their mission was.
I'm basically thinking the seller owns these newspapers in Poland. You know, these are some of the main local papers, like here in Kraków, Gazeta Krakowska and Dziennik Polski, were owned by this German media conglomerate. So they have a lot of users because they also have a lot of websites. But I'm pretty sure they realize that newspaper legacy media is going downhill. And all of a sudden you have this foreign state player that wants to buy up media groups because they're afraid of foreign ownership as a potential buyer. And they're like, okay, let's sell this to them. It's going downhill anyway. And they're going to probably spend too much for it.
Thank you for buying this.
And it'd be interesting to see what their approach is. I have a feeling rather than be heavy-handed with kind of firings and editorial things, they'll do a big economic restructuring and basically kind of gut the resources of these local newspapers. This is, as we've said many times, cynical ploy by Kaczynski to exert influence over the private media. It's very, very worrying. It's not good. I'm not saying the jackboots are on the ground and there won't be TVN and all these other channels where you can pick up, news that's unbiased or certainly coming from a better perspective. But this is shocking, really. I mean, it's not something you really like to see.
We all know that Olren is basically being used as a proxy by the government, Dr. Mike. But I mean, stuff like Dziennik Polski, no offense to anybody, but this is fairly small stuff. Surely the government must have some higher profile, kind of like marquee media properties in mind when they talk about repollinizing the media.
Well, who could they buy right now? Like, Wyborcza is Polish-owned, more or less.
But not the kind of polls that the government would like to see.
Yeah, that's part of it. And that would be a huge deal to buy them anyway. Even though they're sinking, they're still pretty expensive, so the government's not going to buy them even if they were for sale. Who else could they buy?
And isn't it weird anyway?
TVN is owned by
the argument is kind of like, well, wouldn't it be lovely if we had 5 Polish billionaires that owned a load of newspapers? That's basically what this comes down to, because
they want their Polish Murdochs, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then, in America, at least they can suck it up, but you never hear Republicans moaning about the fact Murdoch's an Australian that owns, left-leaning titles, even, Josh, one could say.
Yeah. How about radio, maybe? Is that on the radar? I wonder. Radio is still a big deal in Poland, yeah?
Yeah, but a lot of the main radio stations are government-owned.
Exactly.
Jedynka, Dwójka, Trójka. The foreign, RMF is only partially foreign-owned. So
it sounds like there aren't that many trophies left that realistically they could get their hands on.
Realistically, no, probably not.
Look, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens editorially at these papers in the next few months. It's something we really need to keep an eye on, and I think this is a huge story. Kaczynski's on a rip lately.
You're suggesting you want when you pick up a daily newspaper from the newsstand that as you cast your eye over the headlines, there'll be like in bold print, kind of like, have you filled up your car today?
Yeah, well, I was wondering about the synergy they're going to achieve between the gasoline stations and newspapers.
Well, they are. That's their only reasonable argument to the competition board and the monopoly boards, etc. Was that they are effectively one of the largest news retailers in the country already.
Well, with the petrol stations and with Rook, yeah.
Dave, let's go to you for an update on something we talked about quite a lot recently since it started, 2 weeks ago? That is the fight between Poland and Hungary on one side and the EU on the other. There was a bit of a breakthrough this week. So it looks like we've resolved the conflict for now.
Big update, yeah. So the conflict has taken a very interesting twist. Not the one I predicted, in fairness. I thought it was go to the mattresses time, get that entire mechanism rewritten at all costs. However, the fudge they've come up with is classic Merkel. I should have kind of anticipated more Merkeling on the situation. She's Merkel the shit out of this one. And what they've done is made the council make a declaration about the mechanism, which is original text hasn't changed. The original text covers everything from specifically talking about LGBT rights and the independence of the judiciary. And the declaration about that clause, which has that in it, says that basically this should only ever be used in context of fiscal corruption of EU funds. So you can clearly make the point, and the smart, I would say the EU watchers from the liberal side who really wanted to put Poland on a naughty step, I think they were the opinion pieces I was most interested in, and they were all furious about this because on top of that it gives Poland the chance, and Hungary, which they said they will do already, to legally challenge this, and only after the ECJ rules on it will this mechanism go into effect. So that's effectively putting a 2-year delay on it, pushing it past the parliamentary elections in Hungary. And then you've got another faction who are jumping up and down straight away on Merkel's orders to make it look like a victory for the EU because the mechanism still remains unchanged. Now, I want to make a separate two-track argument. I believe they could have hardballed if they were willing to stick out and got the mechanism fully rewritten. Clearly, what I underestimated was their nervousness about blocking the pandemic recovery package. Poland's economic situation, its performance during the pandemic has been worsening and worsening and worsening. Maybe Peace are feeling the pressure on that front. Clearly, though, Orbán wanted this. So that just shows you how toothless this mechanism has become now. You don't think he's planning on losing in 2022, do you? I don't think he's planning on becoming, a full-blown liberal Democrat all of a sudden. No. So he's comfortable with it. He's laughing about it. They all are, because they know this gives great cover now to the other countries like your Maltas and your Spains and, and Italy that don't really want this to ever come in because it's a dangerous mechanism. I still believe it's a dangerous mechanism, dangerous precedent, a little bomb that's been placed into EU legislations that probably won't go off for a decade, maybe a decade and a half, but eventually it's going to cause...
It sounds like Poland and Hungary walking away as winners or at least satisfied at a minimum, yeah?
Absolutely. You can definitely say that, yes. However, they had such a strong hand, in my opinion, because economic performance is all relative in this situation. They have a very strong fiscal position, Honestly, I was surprised a little bit. I was a little bit surprised that they didn't go all in and veto until they changed the mechanism fully.
I mean, there were parts of the government here, of the coalition government, from Ziobro mainly, who wanted them to go all in, said, this declaration isn't in no way legally binding. It doesn't.
It isn't.
It doesn't change the law that we want changed. If everybody agrees to this declaration, every nation agrees to the declaration, then why don't they agree to change the
However,
wording?
right, what would have to happen in reality is then the council will call a session and they'll say, Poland's on the naughty step. This is what we're having the vote about for the qualified majority. There'd be a procedure. There'd be a kind of a chance for everyone to give their point of view, and then the vote would happen. And I'm sure the thinking is, during the discussion phase, constantly it would be bang the drum. Hang on a second, guys. This is the council, not the commission. you were the guys who released the declaration about the mechanism. How can you possibly stand there and use it for LGBT rights or something when you said you wouldn't do that? So that's what they're counting on. And I do believe, knowing the EU, and how fudgy things can get, this might cause an issue, but I think much later down the line, I think basically Morawiecki's just said to himself, look, we need to get the EU funds back on, showing Mike, as I always say, how utterly important they are, no matter what side of the political
keep the money flowing.
Because it's not just that they give you money, it's where it goes. It's guaranteed structural funds. It's like the multiplier effect. The minute the EU invested in the project, it's happening. So all of a sudden, it develops momentum. And
Dr. Mike, let me ask you real quick. When you look at peace over the last, 4 or 6 months, one storm after another, rocky roads, constitutional courts, abortion law protests, are fighting with the EU. But in case after case, it seems that the opposition or the threat kind of dissolves, it loses momentum, it works itself out somehow. Do you see peace as kind of like, maybe not unscarred, but like minimally scarred from all these fights moving forward?
They definitely are. You have to remember that PiS is in a coalition government with Polska Razem and Solidarna Polska. And they don't always see eye to eye. This veto was one of those situations.
Yeah, Jabro's statement was that's what I wanted you to talk about. It was very strident. He's still against it, right?
He's still against it, but he can complain a lot. But forcing, say, a vote of confidence and breaking up the government and possibly bringing in new elections, none of them really win on that. Because they might not win those kind of elections, while otherwise you still have more than 3.5 years to the next election. So a lot of energy is being used up by opponents of the government, but the question is, will they still have this energy in a few years when it really matters?
That's an eternity. 6 months is an eternity in politics. Forget about 3.5 years, right? So we'll see what happens.
Why do you think Jabro's going in so hard on it then?
He's making noise because he is weaker than he was in the previous government, before the last parliamentary elections. Maybe he's counting on if the government does fall apart, he might win more votes. There's a lot of possibilities here. He also might just be playing the time game. He's a lot younger than other politicians, in his early 40s. So he can wait out 1 or 2 election cycles of not being in the government if he knows they can come back and be in a stronger government that's more in line with his views.
And I just want to make something very clear here. Some of the things they'd use this mechanism against Poland, I would totally agree with them about. I'm worried about the entire EU having a law like this on its books that says a qualified majority can put any other country on the naughty step for rule of law, something that broad. To me, this is a big moment in EU history. So as much as I'd love to clap Poland on the back for getting what's admittedly a big political result here, and I read George Soros's blog this morning. He's not happy at all. And a lot of people like Soros, who really follow the EU closely and really know what they're talking about, really think this was a massive back down. It was basically Merkel saying, look, not on my watch, I'm out the door, lads. I'm not having a big incident on me phone.
Just quickly, Dave, before we move on, I'm just curious what you think. When it comes to Poland and Hungary, getting lectures from the EU and whatnot, do you think it's possible that there are certain countries that are giving Poland and Hungary maybe some back channel support, saying, look, guys, we'd love to come out publicly on your behalf, but we just can't do it?
Well, we've heard certain laughable suggestions that the V4 is now exploded because Czech and Slovakia weren't publicly out front backing this as vocally. It became a bit of a Poland-Hungary thing. And I think somewhere along the line, somebody needs to take political responsibility for that in Poland. That never should have been the case. The V4 all agree about this topic. They've actually been quite open about it, more their senior politicians domestically when they've been speaking about it. And also then there's a whole other basket of countries. Let's not forget the EU's broader context, that the Frugal Four gave up the traditional agreements for the way the ECB funds bailout packages and allowed a certain amount of leveraged debt between the entire EU, the Hamiltonian moment we debated a few months ago. That is terrifying a lot of the southern European countries who fully intend on putting their foot on that mechanism, that they'll be cut head off at the pass by using
it's almost as if it's all about the money, which is what I've said many times. You always make fun of me for saying it's about the money, but it is.
Well, look, broadly speaking, I'm a big, huge supporter of the EU's entire history and what it's achieved. But I've always had reservations about ever closer union politically and culturally, because it does cause
Well, you might
issues.
want to tell that to certain people in charge.
The issue it causes is it takes the attention off what an economic miracle the whole thing has been. All the successes of the EU are economic.
Can I move on?
And all the rules. Let me just finish
guess
here. The rules you guys never like to talk about. The ones that say no state sponsorship, fair competition, pay tax collection that actually works. The things that make states actually fucking functional. That's the important part of the EU. That's why it raises up countries that join it, and that's why it's important and people want to be in it. And countries like Turkey and Ukraine and Belarus will bite your hand off, if you remember.
Let's finish up with one more thing. You mentioned a miracle of economic development. Let's finish with another miracle: the fact that tens of millions of people in Poland are going to eat carp later this month. We've talked. It's one of our favorite subjects on our show. Carp, the mystery of the popularity of carp at Christmas time. If you go back and listen to our Christmas episode, maybe we'll post it again this year. We talked about how we just can't understand why carp is such a big deal. Dr. Mike, you and I were talking about it earlier this week. I told you I was at Carrefour, and for the first time that I can remember in a few years, I saw one of those big tubs of live carp where you choose your own fish, and there was a sign above the tub. It said, I'm paraphrasing here, something to the effect of, for the in the interest of animal welfare, we have to kill the carp for you. They didn't use those words exactly, but they were in Polish too. But anyway, so what's the status with buying carp in this country when it comes to animal welfare issues?
Well, technically, it's still legal to buy them live, but
take it home live.
Exactly,
Okay.
You get it in a plastic bag or something like that, but. What has happened is that a lot of the main chains like your Tesco's, your Carrefours, have all said that they're not going to provide them live. They'll be in a tank where they're claiming that they get enough air and oxygen and it's clean.
And they will humanely kill it for you.
Yes, they will humanely bludgeon it to death with a hammer or whatever they do. I don't know.
I think they do use a hammer. They just smash its head in. I mean, what the hell?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do carp have feelings? Do we even care?
I only care because they don't taste that great. I mean, it's...
Oh, what's with the carp? Did you see the news that last week the city gave out 10,000 free carp meals? Why were they? Why now? By the way, why actually it was last week? Why last week? Do you know anything about that?
It started last week, but it's going on for another 2 days.
They're going to move around different places in the city. Right?
When I first heard about this, I thought it was for the homeless. No, they're just passing out carp apparently to fried carp with cabbage, whatever, and bread. But then I read that it was actually one of the main producers of carp here in southern Poland, is the one providing the fish and his...
Don't be so cynical, Mikey.
So it's a good advertisement stunt.
That's what you call a virtuous circle. They get some advertising, the lads get some carp.
Mark, sorry, what's your name? Mike. For the benefit of anybody listening who doesn't know, just give us the executive...
Sucks, the blood's gone to his head.
Give us the executive summary, short version of how, although many people think carp is like an ancient Polish tradition, it really isn't.
Well, as we all know that during Christmas time in Poland and in a lot of Catholic countries, you eat fish on Christmas Eve, not red meat. And in Poland for the last 50 years, carp has been the mainstay, 70 years. And, carp was always available, but it was really not that popular until after the war when there were shortages in other types of fish. And the government, then the new communist regime, to build up morale, decided to really go hard when it comes to carp, mainly because it's easier to produce en masse. It can survive in most conditions, as in you can actually put it in a bag and give it to somebody while it's still alive, so fresh. And that really became the main reason it boomed right after the war and became a tradition.
I'm going from memory here. I read an article a while ago, I can't remember what it was, and they were saying that you're exactly right, and after the war it was more of a Jewish tradition, eating carp. The Poles used to eat different fish, but that was, like you said, the one that they had the best access to, so they had a commie ad campaign, kind of like eat carp, it's awesome, and it worked. Everyone was all over it.
What's going to be on your family Christmas Eve dinner table, Mike? What kind of?
We do eat fish only on Christmas and pierogi,
but no carp.
There's sometimes like
real fish.
There is carp, but it's usually like one fillet just to be there. But it's usually more like cod and paddock, and I don't know what my mom gets.
I'll be doing the whole bit. Holy
Flounder.
bread. We sing a few songs.
Had shark once.
We do it all in the big traditional room.
Christmas shark.
12 courses, no me.
Josh, I forgot. Are we in agreement that carp is an abomination?
More or less, yeah. I have on a couple of occasions eaten it and thought, like, my God, this is
horrible.
This is almost tolerable. But in the general scheme of things,
tolerable.
In the general scheme of things, it is a vile abomination and should not be put anywhere near a table. Salmon, I think, a large baked salmon, I think, would be a royal feast on any respecting Catholic Christmas Eve, in my opinion.
Interesting little tale about carp or lack thereof. My missus is from a little village near Novosavice, about 10 miles from it, and it's beside a lake and a river, and they have their own traditional river fish that they've always eaten in that area. So they're never on the carp bus, bit blasé for them.
Nice.
So it's actually not the worst. I mean, it's marginally better than carp, but a lot worse than eating a shoe.
It could be worse, yeah. Carp is just, it's
vile.
It is vile.
It tastes how it looks.
It's vile and with lots of bones.
All right, one or two things left over. I think we might leave them for next week. Any final thoughts or comments before we wrap it up this time?
No, I think we're all done with it. We're good.
Yeah, okay, so get your interruption ready, because here I go. All right, guys, thanks for listening. That's the news for this week. Oh, we forgot. I should have said this. I interrupt myself. I should have said this at the top of the show. I wanted to give another thank you to our friends at Yolk Co-working Spaces for helping us out last week. Dr. Mike and I were over there for an interview we did online.
Why do you pronounce it Yolk? Is
Yolk.
Is it not like yolk as an egg yolk?
Yolk.
I mean, the spelling to me looks like the same as the way that yolk, as in the yolk of an egg, is spelled. So why
Yolk.
do you...
Is this going to be a limited?
No, it's yolk, not yolk.
It's
tomato,
yolk.
tomato,
egg yolk.
And we got a donation.
Yolk.
There's an L right there in the fucking word.
John.
What?
John,
it's English language, John.
My default answer, Josh. Spell Leicester, the city of Leicester. Spell it for us, please. Yes, that's what I thought. Okay. Anyway,
stop.
Spell Chumley.
We got a donation from someone who used to live in Krakow.
Did something else we should have mentioned at the top of the show.
Yes, someone who I haven't seen in many years, but very fond memories
Catherine,
of.
thank you very much. We owe you. If we ever see you again, come back to Krakow and see us
come
one of
and
these
visit
days.
us for a beer.
We appreciate it.
I suspect it's just a down payment on advanced beers for when she
That's
does
very
come back
true
and
as well.
visit us.
Let me finish what I was going to say about our friends at Yolk. Yolk.
Fuck's sake.
Yolk. It's Yolk.
Check it out.
Yolk.
We have friends. Who's paying you?
Nobody. But they gave us a place that Yolk co-working space. Yolkfolk.pl is the address if you're looking for a space. If you're freelancing, if you're looking.
Do you say folk?
Would you stop
or do you say
interrupting?
folk?
Folk music. Folk. Yeah, there's an L in it.
Seriously?
Do you say folk?
Yeah, of course.
Then you're completely wrong.
What?
Folk music.
Yeah.
Foke is folk.
Folk music.
Yeah, of course.
Folk. It's folk music.
What? Folk.
It's the socks, isn't it?
Folk. So there's no L in folk.
Not when you pronounce it.
How do you say folklore?
Folklore.
Sorry, what did you say that again?
Folklore.
Oh, it sounded like an L in there.
Yeah, after the K.
No, before the K.
Folklore.
No, sorry, completely wrong. From the people who gave us Leicester and what's the other one?
There's Fanshawe and Chumley.
I love Dylan's folk era.
I'm pretty sure Catherine right now is regretting her choice of donating
Folk music.
Folk. No.
Oh, folk off.
No. It's folk music.
Just fucking wrap this shit up, will you? People
I've tried several times, but certain people keep interrupting me.
Josh, hit the button.